So once you are ready to open up the Trifecta software, just click on the Trifecta icon. Again, whether you're doing it from your design center or from a computer. Then what you want to do next is find the file that you want to slice and print. I happen to have my STL files, on my thumb drive, so I'm choosing that drive. I'm clicking on the file where my file can be found. Once you have the 3D print selected, by clicking on it, just click OK. That's what actually launches the VariQuest software, and you're going to see that once it launches, it puts your object on the build plate. Here's where you can, as mentioned earlier, you can adjust your printer settings before you print. So I'm going to review those with you real quick, and then we'll proceed to slice the 3D print as well. In your user's guide, pages 15 and 16 go through each and every one of these setting options that I'm reviewing with you now, so you can become more familiar on your own time as well. But a couple things to note. First of all, down below, here's where you have the option to resize your object before you print. So it comes in at 100%. If you want to make it twice as big or maybe half as big, you can make those adjustments very easily. If you have your keyboard, you would just hover over it with your mouse and type in the percentage that you want, and you'll find that the height, the width, and the depth adjust automatically, but you can adjust those on your own as well. But if you don't have a keyboard, like right now I'm just using my mouse, there is a white button that you can click on right by the object itself that you can click on, and when you drag your mouse back and forth, you can see how it makes the object bigger or smaller, and it is changing my scale down below. So I'm going to make it a little bit smaller because I want to take a little less time to print this. Obviously, the bigger it is, the more time it's going to take to print, but really there is no time limit. Keep that in mind, that you can print as long as you've got filament. You can print for as long as you need to get the desired object that you want. But that's how you can scale it and change the size of the object. The other thing I wanted to mention is down below you can duplicate. If you know you want to do multiples of this gem, you can click on the duplicate button and you can enter in the quantity that you want. There's also up above this import button that you can click on. This allows you to bring in additional prints. So you can go back to where you were and bring in another print, for example, and it just positions it right onto your build plate. Now, if ever you find that the object is gray like that, then you know it's out of bounds. So just keep that in mind. You always want it to stay within the printing range, and you always want to make sure that it's represented in green versus gray. You can always reset. There's a reset button too to where you were before. If you don't want a particular print on there, like I don't need to print two objects right now, there is a delete button as well. So I deleted that, and then again, I'm going to reset it. You will find also that sometimes, and there's also a center button, by the way, too. So it just makes it really easy to get it back to the way you want it. Sometimes you will find, and I did reset it, so I'm going to go ahead and make it a little bit smaller like I did before. But sometimes you're going to find that your print comes in kind of kittywampus. It doesn't lay flat when it puts it on the build plate. If ever that should happen, there is a lay flat button so that you can click on that to make sure that it's laying on the biggest, flattest surface to just ensure that you have that added stability when it's printing. So if, for example, it comes in a little off like that, just click on the lay flat button, and it again will make that adjustment for you. You have these different access rings as well that you can, students can use to see the print, at all kinds of different, in all different kinds of angles, etc. So that's a little bit about that. It's up above that you're going to find your printer settings. So that's what I'm going to review with you right now, starting with resolution. And what I love about this software program, it's so user-friendly in the fact that you can hover over the particular setting and it gives you a little drop-down window that tells you exactly what that's going to do. So as I talk about resolution and as I click on it, you will find that there are 4 different settings for resolution, ranging from 50 microns all the way up to 300. So 50, 100, 200, and 300 microns is how the resolution is measured. Now 300, the default is 200 microns, so you can leave it at that if you want, or if you need to make some adjustments, that's when you would select a different resolution. The smaller the number, so the 50 microns, that's going to give you the finest print. That means that the layer of filament is as thin as it can be, and you're going to get a very solid, just a really fine, high quality print when you select 50 microns. Now with a gem like this, it doesn't really matter, so I could leave it at 200 or even bump it up to 300 microns. The resolution isn't going to be as good, meaning you're going to see more lines going across, representing the different bands of filament, but it still turns out to be a great print. Now keep in mind that the finer the quality, the higher the resolution, meaning the lower the number in microns, the longer it's going to take to print. So you do want to keep that in mind as well. If I set this to 50 microns, it's going to take a lot longer to print than if I have it at 300 microns. So that's resolution. You also have infill, and infill determines or is basically the print density, how dense the print is going to be, how much filament is filled in that particular object. You can, when you click on the drop-down menu or drop-down options, you'll see that it ranges from 0%, which means it's going to be completely hollow, or you can choose 18% or 30%. That's infill, and again, that determines the object or the print's or density, I should say, the density of the object. Now, if you want to go higher than 30%, you really want it to be a solid infill and a more dense object, you can always go in the upper left corner under Advanced and bring up an Advanced Settings window, and here you will find infill listed, where you can set it all the way up to 100%, from 0 to 100%. So again, that is the print's density. The higher the infill, of course, the more filament that you're going to use, and the more time it's going to take to print. So do keep that in mind as well. I'm going to get back to this window in a second, but that is what infill is. Next you have wall, and wall is the thickness of the outer perimeter of the print. So the wall ranges from 1 to 4, and the higher the number, the thicker the wall. So if you need some added stability, you might want to select 3 or 4 for a thicker wall around your print. The default is 2, and for this particular object, 2 is just fine. So I'm going to leave it at that, but that is wall. Now next to wall is support. Support is not activated, but you will want to activate that if you have overhanging structures. It is important that that you create that stability for those overhanging structures. So think about like an eagle with its wings fully spanned out, for example. When it's printing and it gets to those wings, if those wings aren't supported, they're going to collapse right away. So what you would want to do is either activate exterior or full support. Exterior is basically going to add that support from the overhanging structure down to the build plate. And it's just thin strands of filament that are going to adhere those two together to make sure that the wings in this case don't collapse. Full support adds support and meaning layers of filament, strands of filament, wherever those overhanging structures are. So it might, even if it's going from one overhanging structure on the print to another and then down to the build plate, it will do that. So we'll figure out where it needs to build the support, not just from the overhanging structure to the build plate, but anywhere that it's needed. So if you're not sure, just select full, and it will build those support layers. When your print is done, those support layers break off very easily because again, there's such thin strands of filament. So you just break them off and you're ready, you're good to go. And again, this is, as I talked about, that trial and error process. Think about students, going to print maybe without having support activated, and their object collapses right away. So then they have to go back to the drawing board and figure out what went wrong, and it will become clear to them that, hey, I probably should have activated support, and that would have helped. So again, it's all part of that hands-on learning approach and really engaging with these different objects that are being printed. So that is what support is. Filament, you probably aren't going to have to do a whole lot with this, but as I mentioned, the filament is biodegradable, plant-based, so it can, the diameter of the filament can change periodically. So we do provide a Trifecta Accessories Kit. If you don't have that, I encourage you to invest in that. It's not very expensive, and what you get with that accessory kit, one of the items is a caliber tool so that you can periodically measure the diameter of your filament and make those adjustments accordingly with the up and down arrow symbols. Then you've got speed and temperature. You will not need to change those settings unless you're getting into some real advanced printing. Otherwise, just leave the speed and temp as they are. But you can change all these other settings according to how you want your print to turn out. As I opened up that advanced settings window earlier, I'm going to do that again and point out a couple other things. I mentioned how you can adjust your infill, make your object more dense by increasing it beyond 30% through advanced settings. Another thing that you can adjust that I want you to be aware of is skirt. Skirting is when you're first going to print something. It lays down a very thin layer that basically outlines the shape of your print. I always like to say it's like a ketchup bottle. You know, when you're going to use your ketchup bottle, you always have that liquid substance that comes out first before the ketchup does. That's kind of what skirting is. And skirting is nice when, and it's set, by the way, to do 2 swipes around the shape of the object on your build plate. So when it's skirting, you want to watch that. You want to look at it, see how it's coming, how the filament's coming out. Is it adhering to the build plate? Is it lifting up? Is it gunking up? You know, are you having any problems? If so, you can pause your print job and make those micro adjustments to the level of your print bed and kind of remedy that before it goes to print. So that's why skirting is important, and you can keep a close eye on that. If you feel like 2 times around isn't enough, you can adjust that. So maybe you want it to skirt 5 times. This is where you can make that adjustment. The other option or thing that I wanted to point out is what's called brim. Brim is also not activated, but you can activate it easily by clicking here and choosing activate. So what it does basically is it just for those objects that need some added support on the build plate, you can activate brim, where it builds thin layers of filament from the base of the object and adheres to the build plate. So even if you have a properly leveled print bed, you've maintained it well, and you're still getting a lifting effect, you might want to activate brim to counter that lifting effect and to keep it from warping on you. I always like to give the example of the Eiffel Tower. If you're printing that, you know, you've got a tall tower with 4 thin, skinny little legs. So your base, it can get a little wobbly and it can get more difficult to support that taller structure. So for that, you would want to activate brim because again, it's just going to secure the foot of the print to the build plate so that it doesn't lift up and or warp on you. Note that when you take it off your build plate, you'll have those thin strands of filament under the base of the print. Sometimes those are a little harder to get off, so you want to use like a chisel or a file to file those down. But that's what brim is. And that's really, those are the features that I like to call out in training as it relates to the Trifecta software, the advanced setting options that you may or may not choose from time to time. So just wanted to cover that. Once you have everything the way you want it, then you're ready to go ahead and slice your object. Up here in the upper right is where you see the slice button. Just go ahead and click on that. And as you can see, it's kind of like frosting a layered cake. It just builds it layer by layer by layer until it's done. So it does it digitally, and that's how it's going to print on your Trifecta printer. So that's how that works. Once that has occurred, you'll notice down below that it does give you the approximate weight of your 3D print, and it tells you approximately how much time it's going to take to print it. So that's very helpful information. We also on our VariQuest Resource Center have a cost calculator. So if you, again, on the home page, click on Trifecta, click on the cost calculator, you can input the estimated weight, and it will give you an approximate cost for that object. Great for your student-based enterprises where you are tracking costs because maybe you're selling different things in your school store or whatever. It's nice to be able to calculate what the cost will be of that 3D, an estimated cost, I should say, of that 3D print. I always like to show this too, how you can just kind of flip the build plate around to see it from all kinds of different angles as well. I also wanted to mention that our Trifecta has one hot end nozzle, as I kind of alluded to earlier, and that means that you can load one color of filament at a time. But we recognize that there are going to be times that you want to do a multicolored object. And I'll just tell you too, that's another feature of the Trifecta that's so nice for schools, because having only one hot end to worry about is really going to help with cutting down any maintenance issues, any problems, etc. So nice to have just that one hot end nozzle. But again, we know that periodically you'll want to do a full color print from time to time. So the way that you can achieve that is down below, after it's been sliced, you'll see that you have this bar with this arrow. When you move the arrow with your mouse, you can see how it's, again, recreating or building that object layer by layer. To add color, different colors to your object, all you do is take your arrow and pull it to the point where you want to have it come to a pause so you can change out your color. You put your arrow at that desired spot, and then you just click on the plus sign, and that is going to pause your print job so that you can take out your existing color, put in a new color, and resume where you left off. Then you can take the arrow again. You can build in all your pauses in advance, of course, and do it all the way to the end. So here you can see I'm going to be able to get a multicolored object. I can do 3 different colors, and again, it will automatically pause so I can take out my one color, put in my new, and achieve a multicolored object that way. Another use, and we have so many schools that have engaged their students even further by using our clear filament, printing their object, and then having students paint their object any color that they want with acrylic paint is what we recommend, but they can really take ownership of what they've created by adding some pops of color and painting that 3D print as well. So that's another way to achieve a multicolored object. Now I'm going to go ahead and edit this because I don't want it to print in multicolors right now. So there is an edit button that takes you back to where you were, and you can just easily slice it again if you should go back and make any edits. And there we go. We've got it perfectly sliced. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to save what I've done. I can save it on my SD card, which of course is what I need to do in order to print it on the Trifecta, but I can also save it on my computer to bring it up at a later date as well. But I'm going to click on the SD card. It just takes seconds to save it, and then I've got a button right here that allows me to properly remove my SD card. So I clicked on that button. Now I know it's safe to remove, so I'm going to go ahead and zoom back out again so I can grab a hold of my SD card, and you'll find that once you have that and you insert it in your 3D print, that's again where everything comes to life. My SD card. And I'll zoom in a little bit on this base so you can see what I'm doing here, but I inserted the SD card. I've got my different menu options in this display. It's highlighted print, so I can just take my knob and push in to select that option. Here are all the different print-ready files that I can review and select for printing. So here's my crystal. It says crystal.g. Of course, that represents that it's in G code. That's the file format as mentioned. So I'm just going to select my crystal. And now we'll go ahead and make sure we got a good shot of the trifecta as it gets ready to print that crystal.